Cram!
After going a short way, they struck the old road, and before long they came to a deep dell, sheltered among the rocks. And there they rested for a while, and had such a breakfast as they could, chiefly cram and water. If you want to know what cram is, I can only say that I don't know the recipe, but it is biscuitish. Keeps good indefinitely. Is supposed to be sustaining, and is certainly not entertaining, and being in fact very uninteresting, except as a chewing exercise. It was made by the Lakemen for long journeys. Well, this is what Professor Tolkien wrote in The Hobbit, but I do have a recipe that we can use. Cram is based on a historical food known as hardtack. It's basically a simple bread made from flour, salt, and water. It's baked to be almost as hard as a rock, and this allowed it to keep and remain somewhat edible for a long time. The ancient Romans were issued this as a ration. In World War I, when Professor Tolkien served in the British Army, they were definitely issuing it as a ration at that point. Modern military rations also contain some sort of crackers. At any rate, we can certainly imagine Middle-earth Rangers using this as their basic core ration or field. It can be soaked or boiled in some liquid, forming a sort of dumpling-like base for a stew or soup. And then you can add other things like squirrel legs and dandelions or whatnot, whatever you find. It's pretty simple to make. I'm going to make some here today, but I have a couple of changes that I want to share with you. I'm going to use 1 cup of wheat flour and 1 cup of buckwheat flour. Now, if you can't find buckwheat flour, it's okay. You can just use 2 cups of any flour you find. But you'll find that buckwheat flour has more protein in it. It's got a better mix of amino acids, and I think the flavor is more satisfying. Yeah. I'm also going to use some honey, as Bjorn did in the cakes that he gifted to Bilbo and the dwarves. Of course, it adds to the flavor, and it may actually help preserve the cram. You're free to leave that out if you like. I'm going to add quite a bit of salt. It helps preserve the cram, of course, supplies the necessary electrolyte for weary adventurers. And if you're adding the cram, making the cram into a soup or stew, that extra salt will help to season your other ingredients. That's it. Let's get to the kitchen and start working on this. So, welcome to my Ranger kitchen. Today I'm going to make, as I said, some Middle-earth cram or hardtack. Let's see, basically there's 3 ingredients in hardtack. That is flour, salt, and water. I'm going to do a little variation on it today. I've only made hardtack 3 times in my life, and so I'm still experimenting, and I reckon I'll always be experimenting. So let's work on measuring out the ingredients here. This bowl here. Start with one cup of regular unbleached wheat flour and 1 cup of buckwheat flour. If you can't find buckwheat flour, don't sweat it. Just go ahead and go to 2 cups of regular flour. Any kind of flour that you seem to find worth a shot. There's your buckwheat. It says gluten-free. That is not a concern of mine. This happens to be a convenient feature of that. Buckwheat's not really a grain as such. It's considered they call it a pseudo grain or something like that. The reason I like it is it's got a lot of protein in it compared to regular wheat flour, and the amino acid mixture is good too, making it a very hearty and filling meal. So that's my dry ingredients. Normally salted that as a dry ingredient, but since I'm working with some warm water, to which I'm going to add my honey, I'm going to go ahead and use the warm water to dissolve the honey, as well as dissolving the salt. Just makes it more convenient. If I don't have warm water with the honey, it's going to stay in this measuring spoon, and I'm going to spend all day trying to get it out. But now that it's in 1 cup of water, now that it's in the water, it's not coming out. I actually need a little bit less than 1 cup of water for this recipe, but it's better to have too much than too little. Okay, here's the salt. I'm actually adding 2 tablespoons of salt. It's a little bit little much for most people's tastes, but we're not making it for most people. We're making it for rangers. And this cram or hardtack it's got to be preserved. It's got to last and remain relatively edible. Here's my recipe and ingredient. So I've got the dry ingredients and I've got the wet ingredients. What I'm going to do here is, if you're not familiar with baking, I'm going to make a little depression in the middle of the dough, of the flour here. Pour just a little bit at a time of the liquid. Yeah, this is about the temperature of a cup of coffee. I don't want to get it too crazy because I'll be in danger of actually cooking the bread before it goes in the oven, right? You don't want to introduce too many variables here. So I'm just mashing this down, getting in the pieces to mix here. At a certain point, I'm going to get my hands involved. You know, it's hard to make bread without eventually getting your hands on the dough. It's just the way it goes. So as you see, I've got some leftover liquid here, and I don't think I'll need it. I don't want to make a really sticky dough. So there's a bread board, and I'm going to be placing my my dough onto. Just splashing some dough on, some flour onto it to keep it from sticking. Although it has no problem sticking to my fingers right now. The thing about buckwheat, actually, it's not a really sticky flour. Like the package says, it's not glutinous. It doesn't have a lot of gluten. Now notice it's kind of flaky right now. I need to knead it some more until it's consistent. This is just the way of the baker. At this point I want to talk about the kind of ovens that were used in the Middle Ages and the ancient period. They'd actually, well, of course this was before electricity and liquefied natural gas and things like this. So what they would do was build a masonry, by which I mean brick, ceramic dome, mostly of bricks, and it would be hollow on the inside, with a flat floor on the inside, consisting of more bricks. And to get this going, they would throw some wood inside, usually just sticks, not really thick firewood, something that flared up fast and burned hot and burned out fast. So once they got that going, it heated up the inside of the masonry oven, and then they scooped out or swept out the coals and the ashes. And right at that point, they'd take the dough and then they'd bring that into the oven, and it would cook by the heat, the residual heat that's let off by the masonry, the bricks inside. So this has a certain characteristic. Okay, at this point I need a rolling pin. Where am I going to find a nice rolling pin? Oh yes, this will do. Fine, it's an empty bottle of beer. Basically I want to get this to an even thickness. I'm thinking half an inch. Other people specify differently. I think as long as it's consistent and you're happy with the overall thickness, then it's up to you, right? Get this out of the way. That'll work. Thinner cooks faster. That says thinner bread in general cooks more quickly, right? And it's going to be time to get into the tool out here. Something I forgot. So stand by, I'll be right back. Okay, this is a handy dandy cookie cutter. There's different sizes of cookie cutters. I'm just going to grab the largest one. Now you can cut your cram into any shape and size or width you want. Myself, I like round cram. You could just cut it in squares if you like. No skin off my nose, so to speak. Anyway, we're just making the same way your grandmother used to make Christmas cookies, right? Same concept. So there's 4 right there. I'm going to see if I can get 2 more out of this. Probably, usually 2 cups of flour will make half a dozen grams. We'll see. Flat, pushing this guy out. There's 5. The last one can be sort of a misbegotten son here. Yeah, same basic thickness. Oh, here we go. Now, right now, I've just made the dough. It's a little springy. Traditionally, you'd leave the dough aside for as much as half an hour to let it proof. That's usually done with leavened bread with, I don't know, using yeast or something like that. Proofing can be done with unleavened bread too. Doesn't matter. Okay, let's see. I come up with 6 good, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. Double check my math. 6 good biscuits. Next we're going to go on to the baking. What I wanted to mention about the baking is that when you have that, oh, by the way, here's a pizza stone. I'm going to cook it on the pizza stone because I'm interested in simulating the effects of the ancient ceramic or masonry ovens. And one thing I'm going to do with the bake, remember I told you about the masonry oven. They would cram in a bunch of wood, burn it up, pull out the coals and the ashes, and the residual heat in the bricks would continue to cook the dough, the bread. But the temperature overall would gradually diminish. And it's thought that that gives a certain special characteristic to the bread. And I want to experiment with that just for the fun of it. In this case, I'm going to put this dough on this pizza stone here. First time I've used this, so it's highly experimental. Typically we want to space things out. It's just a good practice. And I'm going to do a cooling off sort of period. Let me quickly get a fork. I want to poke some holes in this. The first batch of hardtack that I made, I didn't do this. Let me get that wet. A wet fork helps. And because I didn't poke holes, the bread sort of puffed up when I baked it. And this is hardtack. It's not croissants, it's not flake pastry or, you know, millefeuille or something like that. It's not meant to be delicate and flaky. So if it puffs up, that's wrong hardtack. So you want to keep it in a nice, solid biscuit shape. So this is my tradition. I actually poke, I'm not sure if you can see it too well, but I poke like a star shape, a cross shape with this. You can do what you want. If you know some Middle Earth ranger type shapes to add to it and make it special and more authentic, why, let me know about that. That sounds interesting. Okay, so I've got these ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and heat up the oven to 400 degrees. Another thing that's interesting about hardtack is another name for it is twice baked bread. In fact, Tolkien himself mentioned another word for cram was twice baked cakes. The reason they bothered with that instead of, as we would these days, just leave it in the oven for a longer time, adjusting the temperature on the dial, so to speak, is that once that residual heat diminishes down to nearly nothing, you can't do any more baking. The bread is bread. So apparently what they would do is pull that bread out, stuff some more firewood into the oven, burn that up, pull out the coals and ashes again, and return the bread to the oven so it was indeed baked a second time. There's an old teething cracker called Zwieback, German for twice baked. So hardtack could be something you give to your children to, you know, I can imagine that. Anyway, we'll start to bake this right away, and soon we'll find out how it turns out. Alrighty, we're doing 10 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright, that was 10 minutes at 400 degrees. Get that. I'm going to bake again. Real high tech here. Not exactly like cutting a bunch of firewood. Pile it into a... Okay, 20 minutes at 300 degrees. Okay, now we're taking it down to 200 degrees Fahrenheit for another 20 minutes. Pretending that we have an old-fashioned masonry oven here. Let's see how that turns out. And okay, that's the end of the 200 degree Fahrenheit bake. I'm going to be happy with that, I hope. What I normally do is leave these in, kind of sticking to the pan here. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to leave these in overnight because a fundamental part of the cooking of hardtack is drying. And we want to make sure there's no moisture left in these biscuits. So I'm going to check back in the morning and I'm sure they'll be nice and dry. Okay, here's what's going on. At the end of the bake, I pulled these out and found they were a little soft. And softness means there's residual moisture in there. That's not good for creme. So what I ended up doing is send these in for another bake. That is 400 degrees, 300 degrees, then 200 degrees, as we did before. So in fact, these are truly twice baked and solid as a rock. If I actually weighed these and weighed the flour that we made this from, the weight of these should be pretty darn close to the weight of the flour on its own, because there should be zero moisture here. And pretty damn tasty. But I'm going to caution you, if you have a really hard cram like this and you're biting into it, be careful. You want to watch your teeth. You might break your teeth. It's that hard. But actually, that's pretty tasty. You've got the hardiness flavor of the buckwheat, a little bit of a honey, but there's so much salt in there it's not really sweet. It's just a nice umami flavor. One thing I wanted to add, if you wind up making the Cram biscuits any thinner than this is about, I think we're working about ½ an inch or so. If you go thinner, then it's going to cook faster and you're going to have to be careful about burning them, overcooking them, so to speak. Anyway, that is how we make Cram. And a ranger would fold these up into his traveling gear and ration off bits and pieces of them as he traveled. Hope you enjoyed making Cram. If you like this and other videos, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more and you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and I'll keep bringing interesting things like this to you. Alright, thank you and be well.